Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of Inside the Club. I'm Belle Fraser, the Utah Hockey Club beat reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune and the host of this podcast. We're doing another solo episode this week. Utah Hockey Club just had the exit interviews for all of its players at Delta Center on Thursday, so I'm going to recap some of the biggest storylines from the day. Free agency, restricted free agents, Logan Cooley's contract, Matias Maccelli's view of his place in Utah, and more. I'll also have stories from that day coming out throughout the summer, but I thought we could just go through some of the main conversations that happened on Thursday, and then the front office and Coach Andre Torini will talk on Monday. This podcast comes out Tuesday, so comments from them won't be included in this podcast because I'm recording it on Saturday, but I will have stories from what Bill, Chris, and Andre have to say, as well as a podcast episode recapping their view of the season. But this one will be more player focused because those are the people that we've gotten to talk to since the season ended on last Tuesday in St. Louis with a 6-1 loss, which was kind of a sour ending to what's been a pretty magical year. A lot of the players and coaches have described the season with that word. So definitely a stinker that I wrote in my recap, highlighted the things that they need to work on, the holes in their game, and is probably a good learning lesson for them to take into the summer. But the players were able to be a bit more reflective on Thursday at Delta Center because they didn't have games to think of or anything of the in-season topics that were on their minds. So I thought we could start with the unrestricted free agents on Utah Hockey Club who are now open to the market this summer and their thoughts on how their season went and where their future is with the team. And we're going to start with Michael Carcone because he had a pretty clear-cut answer for where he saw his future with Utah, and that is no future. I can read a quote that when we asked, do you want to be here next season? How do you think things went? He said, I love the guys in there, great group, but I don't think there's going to be an answer. I don't think we're going to agree on anything. I spoke to the coaching staff and management, and I think we're going in different directions. I asked him what were those disagreements, what caused, the movement in different directions, and he said consistency, a bigger opportunity in playing time, improving himself. I asked him if he felt like he had a good enough opportunity to prove himself this year, and he said, quote, no, I don't, and that's okay. I understand the business side of things and where the team needs to go. And he was professional about it. He didn't come in and rip management and coaching and the situation he was in this year. He kind of just said, I believe in myself and I'm an NHL player and I deserve to be in the lineup on a nightly basis. And I've talked to Carcone throughout the season and he has that confidence. Last year in Arizona, he had 29 points, which were 21 goals and 8 assists in 74 games. And he mentioned that. He said, I've scored 20 goals in this league. There's no reason I can't do it again. He said, I think I can do better, to be honest, just staying confident, leaning on the guys in that room. I think that helped too. So Carcone was one of a few players whose role really got smaller this year. He was in the final season of his contract, which had a $775,000 AAV and is now an unrestricted free agent. He's 28 years old, and I think he believes that he's not a 13th forward or someone who should be regularly healthy scratched. And you can debate that, but he was undrafted, spent a lot of time in the AHL before getting his shot in Arizona. So he's a grinder. He's played with a chip on his shoulder his entire career, and he's a hard worker, and he knows his worth. And I think when you looked at the Utah lineup down the stretch with Josh Doan earning consistent time, obviously the rising stardom of Logan Cooley and Dylan Guenther, and then Matias Maccelli was in the lineup a lot to start the season, obviously not in the second half. Even Liam O'Brien as well, when he started getting looks, Carcone was kind of picked over a couple times there. So he never found the pace and consistency I think he wanted, nor the team wanted from him. But from his perspective, he was never given enough leeway to do that. So it seems like he probably wants higher term, higher value, and a higher role on this team. And that's not something that general manager Bill Armstrong feels they can provide him in Utah, which is unfortunate. Carcone, I think, was, one of the grittier, more sandpaper players that Utah had, kind of a no BS guy. He was always really refreshing to talk to because it was less of, the fluff or the PR answers. He really said how he felt and how he felt about the team. So definitely a character that Utah will probably miss, but it's not a huge hole to fill. I think that's why the team probably feels comfortable moving on from him. And I think it's a sign that, not that, okay, Carcone's leaving, you're moving in the right direction, but it's because they have players in the pipeline and are looking to make a splash in free agency and probably through trades this summer that they're able to say goodbye to some of their depth players because they have enough reinforcement coming in. And that just shows that the rebuild is working. They're coming into the 5th year. And it's the hard part about it. It is a business and you have to say goodbye to some players during that stretch, but it's because you're turning a corner and you'll probably fill it with a player who might have more talent. If you see what they do this summer, we don't know what they're going to do. But so yeah, in terms of that unrestricted free agent, it seems like Michael Carcone will not be back in Utah and doesn't seem like he really wants to. Not that he didn't have a good experience, but I think in terms of things on the ice, he needs a fresh start and a bigger role. Those were his own words. Looking at someone who kind of pitched himself to stay in Utah and said a lot of good things about his experience was Nick Bjugstad. He's also an unrestricted free agent this summer, and it's going to be tough negotiations for him because he had a really down season, an off year for himself, and he revealed at the exit day interviews that he actually had surgery during this off season. It feels like a million years ago, but I'm sure fans remember he wasn't really in training camp and he missed the first, 10-ish games of the season with a lower body injury. And Andre briefly mentioned that it was his back, but he walked back those comments because he realized he slipped up. But I think everyone could kind of deduce that it was his back because this is something that Bjugstad has dealt with for a really long time. It's not a new thing. And he said he got surgery, so it sounds like those two might have been connected. And he was coming off an injury, and he said that was really tough for him to get back in the groove after missing training camp and having to rehab from that. And it showed in his numbers. Unfortunately, this year he had 19 points, 8 goals, and 11 assists in 66 games. And that's coming from last season when he had 45 points, 22 goals, and 23 assists in 76 games. So he had a lot more production in the end of the season. I want to say the last 10 games of Utah Hockey Club seasons, he had 3 goals in 5 games, and you felt him gaining a little bit more confidence, but it felt like it was almost too little too late in terms of the scoring aspect of it. I do think Bjugstad has been effective away from the puck. Forecheck, that third and fourth line, the bottom 6 that he's been a part of, has kind of taken pride in being a hitting lines and hard to play against, but you need more from Bjugstad. They aren't just having him on the team to play that depth role. I think they expect him to be a 20-plus goal scorer, and that's just not what he was this season. But he is 32 years old. He brings that good veteran presence. The guys in the room love him, and the one thing he made clear at exit day was he's taking the summer to get better. He was very determined. He said, I know I'm old by some accounts, but I don't feel old. I'm an old guy in that locker room because our team's super young, but he said he's going to go back to Minnesota this summer, get a lot of training in. He feels like he has a lot more to give with this team, and it's somewhere that he really wants to be. And Bjugstad has spent, in his NHL career, he's been on 5 teams, including the Coyotes, before getting to Utah. And he said that Utah Hockey Club, the organization, ownership, it's the best he's been treated as a player, and his family has been treated from top down. So he said it's a place that obviously he wants to be, and he feels like he can still make an impact. He's in the last season of a contract which had a $2.1 million AAV, so I can't imagine he has a great argument to ask for more money or a long term right now. I don't think Bill Armstrong would give that to him. I also think it doesn't help that Alex Kerfoot got the contract extension in March. He's a veteran depth forward who plays center, who can play the wing, just like Bjugstad. They're obviously different players. Bjugstad brings the size, but it feels like if you're Utah, do you sign and use your cap space and your roster spots for 2 more veteran guys when you already have Kerfoot locked up, when you could give younger prospects or just players in your system already more ice time? So, it's a hard decision, and Bjugstad's someone that was in Arizona for a bit and has been a big part of that leadership group. So it's the things that have to happen when your team goes from rebuild to winning. It's not easy. Everyone that has won a Stanley Cup, building that roster and constructing that team, feelings weren't not hurt. These are the tough management decisions that you have to make when you want your team to turn a corner. And not to say that Utah is a better team with or without Bjugstad, but sometimes it's the good guys that have to let go for a team to get over the hump. I'll read what Bjugstad said. He said, quote, "Obviously, we'll see what happens in regards to his contract. I liked it here, and we'll see where Bill is at. He's got some decisions to make, and he has a lot of guys in the pipeline. For me, the main focus is going to be getting back to my full strength, and I think I can do that and have a good summer. We'll see what transpires, but I love the city, love the people, and the organization." As far as the organization, I mentioned this previously, but he said, "I've been in a lot of different teams, so I've gone to see different markets, different owners, and this is the best I've been treated as a player." So Bjugstad also made a joke at the end. He was asked, what's your pitch for free agents to come to Utah? And he said, well, I am a free agent, so I'll say that it sucks here. He was obviously joking because he doesn't want them going out and getting another forward instead of him. But, he had some really nice things to say about the first year here. But it's tough because a return to Salt Lake City is not guaranteed for Bjugstad, so we will see where that goes. Next unrestricted free agent was Robert Bortuzzo, and I think it is very clear that he will not be back in Utah and maybe not the NHL. He signed a 1-year, 2-way contract with Utah last summer, and this was his 14th season in the NHL. And it seems like, he was hinting towards retirement at the end of the season. Utah's last game of the year was in St. Louis against the Blues. Bortuzzo spent 10 years with the Blues organization, won a Stanley Cup there. That's where obviously he spent a majority of his career. That place means a lot to him, and he had only been in 16 games for Utah Hockey Club before that game on Tuesday, both because he had a lower body injury, but also just roster management. He was usually the 7th, 8th defenseman at times, kind of more of a locker room guy, which everyone really appreciated from him and his perspective, but did not get a lot of playing time. But they put him in for that game against St. Louis, and we talked to him that morning, and he was pretty emotional. He said, "I'm not going to make any proclamations now about retirement, but I'm just trying to take it in and have fun." And his parents made the 14-hour drive from Thunder Bay, Ontario to be there for his game. I wrote a story about it and interviewed them in the Tribune if you guys haven't seen it, but Bortuzzo's, they're a great family. His parents were really emotional about it too. They said they wouldn't miss the game, and they used to do that road trip all the time when he was in St. Louis, and they got texts from all the parents of the St. Louis players, and Doug Armstrong, the GM of the Blues, welcomed them to their box, and they said they got the same treatment in Utah. So it was a pretty storybook ending for Bortuzzo if he takes it that direction, to be able to play presumably his last NHL game in St. Louis, the place where, so much of his NHL success came from. But he also talked about how grateful he was to the Utah organization and the fact that they gave him a chance to play another year in the NHL. When I was talking to his mom, Susan, I asked her what was her first reaction when she heard her son was going to Utah, this new team, and she said, "We were just happy that he got another year in the league. That's what he wanted. He just wanted to stick around for one more." And she said, it's almost bonus time now, so they were happy for him. And and they said that he had nothing but great things to say about the organization. It's been a fun ride for them, being able to see a brand new market so late in his career. And he was pretty straight up in his exit interviews as well. He joked, we asked what was next for him, and he said golf. And then kind of got more serious. He said, "Obviously, I have some decisions to be made here. Don't exactly know what the future holds hockey-wise." And just about his experience with Utah, he said, "It's been awesome. I've played on some close-knit teams, and this team is no different. Truly a strong brotherhood. Guys are happy at the rink every day, and I think that's a huge contributor to what we've been able to do this year and build along the way." So I think having a guy like Bortuzzo in the locker room was really beneficial for everyone. We were at the hotel for morning media that day in St. Louis, and they were having their closed-door team meeting down the hall. And when they announced Bortuzzo was in the lineup, there was a huge, loud clapping eruption, hooting and hollering for him, and you could just tell how much his leadership had meant to them. And we were interviewing him afterwards, and the guys were, saying his name, cheering for him, throwing their fists in the air, walking past the media scrum. So I think that's a guy behind the scenes that fans didn't see a lot, and the media didn't interview a bunch, but when you did, he was really just happy to be there. And he said to me a couple weeks ago, "I came into the league to play one game, and now I've been here for 14 years. So he's just taking it as it comes. But it looks like Robert Bortuzzo definitely won't be back in Utah, and we'll see this summer if he gets a PTO or, signs another 1-year deal. But it looks like he might not. And he made a joke that he'll be the first alumnus of Utah Hockey Club if he retires. So Another first for Utah Hockey Club history if this is it for Robert Bortuzzo. And if so, congrats to him on an incredible career and getting to finish it out in a really unique situation here in Salt Lake City. Next up is another defenseman that maybe fans didn't see a whole lot of, Nick DeSimone, but in my opinion, had a really big impact and played his role perfectly when he was in the lineup. DeSimone, if people remember, was claimed off of waivers from the New Jersey Devils in January 5th, I believe. And he was an addition when Utah was still dealing with all of their back-end injuries. So he got a lot more playing time when he first came to Utah in January, but then Jersey came back, Marino was fully healthy, Sergachev was fully healthy, so he kind of turned into more of the seventh defenseman for them. He was in if someone was hurt or someone needed a break and things of that matter. But I think when he went in, he was reliable, he was dependable, he was simple, he was steady, he never did too much. And I think that just comes from his internal confidence. He's 30 years old, he's not a rookie, he's been in the league, he knows what it takes to be successful on and off the ice. And a lot of his teammates and coaches have talked about the way he's carried himself. You know, it's not ideal getting put on waivers, and Nick has talked about that. It's not great for you, it's not great for your family, you don't know where you're going to go, and then you get picked up by any of the teams. And he said he was really grateful that he landed in Utah, a sentiment that a lot of the players said he echoed, just the way they're treated on a day-to-day basis. He said he loved the guys in the room, and he feels like he really fit into the Utah system well, which I agree with. He's fast when he needs to be. He's a puck-moving defenseman, but he's also kind of meat and potatoes. You know, he's there and he'll shoot and he has an offensive flair to him, but he'll shut it down. And he played with Olli Maatta a lot of the time. So I think those two were just a good old reliable pair. You know, Nick DeSimone isn't a fancy defenseman, but that's not what they needed him to be. And I think he showed that in the 20 games that he's played. And he also beat out two Utah Hockey Club roster players for that seventh defenseman spot. Vladislav Kolyachonok was traded to the Penguins earlier this season. And then Juuso Välimäki, too, was assigned to the AHL. And those were two guys who were kind of in the spot that DeSimone is now. And he came in and kind of took that slotting from them. So I think that says a lot about the early impact he had. And for him, again, he's an unrestricted free agent. And he's kind of been up and down his whole career, signing one-year deals. He's been put on waivers twice. And he said that Utah is a place he'd like to come back to. He said, I would like to be back. I feel like I fit in well on and off the ice, but it's not up to me. That's why you have agents and GMs. They'll figure that out. He continued to say, I think I just proved that I can play nightly and help the team. Every night you still have to prove it. Just coming in and playing my game, fit in with the system we play, fast, moving pucks. I think that was just a good fit for me, and I had some good partners. So DeSimone, it's not like this team absolutely needs to sign him. They also have defensemen in the pipeline. Everyone remembers Maverick Lamoureux, Duda. If Simashev is able to come over this year, he'll probably spend some time in the AHL. But there's definitely guys that you want to start making room for on the roster, but they don't have the experience that Nick DeSimone does. And if you're calling up Lamoureux or Simashev, you don't want them to be a seventh defenseman. You want them to be a legitimate NHL player. It's not worth having them be healthy scratched or be a sixth defenseman twice a week. They rather have those guys develop in the AHL. So I think, yes, you want to make room for your prospects and guys that are going to be regular defensemen eventually for this team, but you also might just need someone like DeSimone who you're able to rely upon and who is comfortable being a depth defenseman instead of an up-and-coming star. So that's definitely someone that I think is a similar storyline to Olli Maatta, that had tough circumstances to start the year but got traded to Utah and really proved themselves. And we'll see if that goes as far as a contract for DeSimone. I don't think it's a lock, but I personally, I wouldn't be against giving him a 1 or 2 year deal. Okay, next up is Jack McBain. He's a different situation because he's not unrestricted. He's a restricted free agent, so the team has a lot of control over him. I'll just read the definition for a restricted free agent for any new hockey fans who maybe don't know the difference. So unrestricted free agent, you're able to go out, talk to different teams. Your agent can contact anyone and you can have conversations about different deals with teams other than Utah without having to clear it with Utah management. They don't get the chance to match the offer or anything like that. And you're an unrestricted free agent once you play a certain amount of years in the NHL, and you're not, coming off of your entry-level deal or your bridge deal. A restricted free agent have rights that belong to an NHL team, and that team has certain levels of protection. the only team that can sign an RFA with a standard player contract is the one that owns the player's rights. So for Jack McBain, Utah owns his rights. Other teams are eligible to sign RFAs, but only via offer sheets. Everyone saw the St. Louis Edmonton offer sheets this offseason. Offer sheets give the team that owns the player's rights the choice to either match the offer sheet and keep the player, or two, allow the player to sign with the new team and receive draft pick compensation based on the value of the contract. So my best guess is that Jack McBain is going to stay with Utah Hockey Club. I don't imagine anyone's going to offer sheet him. I could be wrong, and it would be a big story if Jack McBain got offer sheeted, but I think it's a guy that Utah wants to keep. He played a lot of different roles this year. He was top six, bottom six, center, left wing, penalty kill, power play too. So he wore a lot of different hats and did it well. And a big thing he talked about this year was not changing his style of play, no matter where he was in the lineup, if that was up and down. And I think he did a good job with that. And that line of the third line of Lawson Krause, Josh Stone, and Jack McBain, I think really found their footing in the last 20 games or so. And you got to see their strengths as a hitting, a checking line, but also they started to score at the end of it too. So definitely something they probably want to build upon. McBain is on the last year of his $3.2 million contract that he signed with Arizona in July 2023. And he was going to go to arbitration for that, but they actually decided on the deal I think a couple hours before arbitration. And in the NHL, arbitration is when a neutral third party comes in with the team and the player and decides a player's salary when a team and player cannot agree on a new contract. So McBain has arbitration rights again if they can't come to an agreement, but that can get kind of seedy. Obviously, feelings are hurt. So I'm guessing management wants to avoid that. But if McBain thinks he's worth more than the team is giving him, that could be a situation. In terms of how McBain views his RFA status, he said, "We'll see what happens this summer. I love this group that we have in the locker room, a lot of close relationships with the guys." He also mentioned you're an RFA, so it's not like you can do too much, but I do think it's an exciting group to be a part of. So like he said, Utah has the rights to match any offer sheet he gets, and he can't go out and test the market like if he was a UFA. So he'll probably go enjoy his summer, wait for his agent to call him and see what the team is saying and then agree to the contract or not. He said the way you get treated here is probably top in the league. The treatment top down is unbelievable. Living in Utah is amazing. And then I included one more quote from McBain. It was one of my favorites of the entire exit day. I think a lot of the players were just appreciative and reflective of the first season in Utah, but something I've been talking a lot about in my stories and just with other beat reporters is it's going to be really interesting to see what next season holds, because this year was great. It was the inaugural season. They finished 12 points above where they were last year. Everyone's happy to have NHL hockey. They're still in the fourth year of the rebuild, so playoffs were an expectation, but that changes next year. And how are people going to react to how they play, and how are the players going to raise the standards for themselves? Ian Cole did not mince words. He said this season, the way it ended was a disappointment, and anything other than that would be saying it's a lie. And there's guys in there like Cole, Mikhail Sergachev, Ole Mata, Kevin Stenlund, who expect to be in the playoffs every single year. So I think the way the team handles the pressure of not being a rebuilding first-year team anymore is going to be really interesting. But I think this quote from Jack McBain showed that they're in the right headspace. They're not going to roll over because they didn't make playoffs this year. He said, there's only one goal in that locker room. The rebuild is over. We know what we have to do now. If it's not really if, it's when here. There's no uncertainty anymore. It's go time here. And that just got me excited for next season. I'm sure fans feel the same way, where you're like, okay, they're pissed they didn't make it. They're ready to go. And I think when Jack McBain has that fire for next year, that's someone you want in the locker room. It's someone you want to be part of your future, and he's had good chemistry, like I said, with the third line, but also with Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley early on. So I think he's kind of a handyman where you can put him anywhere, and he's huge. His physicality had most hits on the team, and he's able to play both sides of that game. When he's more of an offensive player, he's not giving up on the defensive side or the physical side of the game. So we'll keep tabs on Jack McBain. I would expect him to be back. Who knows the numbers in that contract, but yes, he's an RFA, so Jack McBain fans should not be too worried about him leaving Utah this summer. And then two more players I wanted to highlight. Neither of them are restricted free agents or unrestricted free agents. They both have another year left on their respective contracts, but could be in the headlines this summer. First is Logan Cooley. Cooley is still on his entry-level contract, which was worth $950,000 for a year, and it goes through the 2025-26 season, but he can sign an extension as early as July 1st this summer. And seeing how the team handled Gunther being eligible for extension this year, they signed him to an 8-year extension in September. They'll likely look to lock Cooley up too, and we've talked about this throughout the year. The modern NHL, usually for teams now, you don't sign a bridge deal and prove yourself to get the big deal. You sign on potential, and that's what Utah did with Gunther, and he had a great season, and it seems like he'll keep on getting better. And Logan Cooley too had a monster season, not just offensively, but his two-way game, I think, was one of the best on the team. He had 65 points, 25 goals, 40 assists in 75 games. So the thought is that he will get locked up for a long time in Utah. Whether that's an 8-year deal like Gunther's or a 5-year deal is yet to see. We asked Cooley where his head was at in terms of his contract, and he said, "For us, it was about, with me and my agent, just playing, not thinking too much throughout the year. I'm sure there's going to be some talks coming up here soon. This is kind of the only time I've really thought of it. It's always in the back of your head, but you just try to focus on the season." He went on to say, "Utah is a spot I want to be for a while." So it doesn't seem like there's any disconnect between management and Cooley about staying in Utah. It'll just be the term and value that's determined this summer. When you're looking at comparables across the league, a pretty glaring one is the Dallas Stars. Wyatt Johnston, he's a 21-year-old center for them. Logan Cooley's 20, turning 21. Johnston had 71 points, 33 goals, and 38 assists in 82 games this year. Very close to what Cooley would have had if he didn't get hurt and miss 8 games this season. So same age, same position, center, 20, 21 years old, same point range, same role on both of their teams. And Wyatt Johnston signed a 5-year, $42 million contract in March, which has an $8.4 million AAV. So I think that's something that Cooley and his agents will bring to Utah Hockey Club front office as a comparable. Maybe the term will be higher, and the cap is also going up. So that's something Cooley has to take into consideration as well. But I would definitely look at the Wyatt Johnston deal as kind of a primer for what Cooley's next deal in Utah might look like when they sign him this summer or this fall. Lastly, Matias Maccelli. He has been a storyline for much of the season, and a really surprising storyline as well. I think coming into the year when we were all in training camp and writing our preseason stories and kind of predicting the main players on this team this year, Matias Maccelli was up there with the Dylan Gunthers and the Logan Cooleys as players that were going to break out this year and build upon what they did the year prior. And Maccelli, in his first year in the league, he got hurt, so he could have ended up with the most points of any rookie. He ended up with the second most points of any rookie and was in Calder Trophy consideration. He made the all-rookie team in that season as well, and he just kind of fell off this year. He had 57 points, 17 goals, and 40 assists last season, but he was a healthy scratch for Utah Hockey Club for almost a quarter of the season. He ended the year with 18 points, 8 goals, and 10 assists in 55 games this year. And he just never found the pace, the consistency, or the statistical numbers that Utah needed from him. And the thing was, he was given a long leash to do that in the beginning of the season. They kept him in the lineup for a very long time, even when he wasn't producing. And on the media sides of things in our work, we were questioning if he should be scratched eventually, if someone like Carcone or Kyler Yamamoto should get a chance in his spot, and they held true to, they believed something would finally click for Maccelli, and they broke up that third line of Maccelli, Bjugstad, and Krause, which was really productive for Arizona last year, but just couldn't find it this season. They put Maccelli on the second line, and then they were forced to put him on the third and fourth line, and someone with Matias Maccelli's shot usually isn't a fourth line player, so in that respect, maybe he wasn't able to blossom into the player he needed to be, but people were outworking him for his job. And as a coach, you have to stop giving the silver spoon at some point. And I think that is where it came a point with Matias Maccelli. In 2022-23, his rookie season, like we said, he had 49 points. So this was really a drastic fall off for him. And Bill Armstrong talked about it at the trade deadline, that this was when Maccelli was getting scratched basically every game. And he said, we hope when Maccelli gets his next opportunity that he'll prove us wrong and he'll come in and he'll make a really big impact and he'll use this as a growing experience. And he got his second chance in March, and nothing glaringly changed in his play. Granted, he was only in for 2 to 3 games after being out for more than a month. But he didn't have that comeback story that I think a lot of people were hoping for. And I think the biggest thing with him is just it's been a mental battle for him. And it's interesting when we talked to Andre about it this year, he never specifically said, oh, Maccelli needs to be better without the puck, or he never really pointed to specific parts of his game, but he did talk about him needing to have a change in mindset, and that when he was getting scratched earlier on, that he didn't think Maccelli was handling it the right way. He said Maccelli was frustrated, obviously, as a player would be, and then the reason they eventually put him back in the lineup was because he said he saw a switch in how Maccelli was handling his healthy scratches, that he was taking the lesson seriously, that in his meetings with coach, he was asking questions with video, he was asking to do video, he was actively trying to get better, so that's why they eventually put him in there. But yeah, they said that they needed to see a change in mindset from him, which I think is interesting when you just look at the relationship that Maccelli might have with the coaching staff and management right now, where maybe it wasn't just his play, it was some off-ice stuff as well. Which, I mean, obviously not confirmed, but just with the way that the reason they put him back in the lineup wasn't because he was practicing well. Andre said it was because he was in a better place mentally. So I think that's something to think about. And, it's tough. It's obviously weighing on Maccelli. When you talk to him, he doesn't have that fire in him, like, oh, I'm ready to come back, I'm ready to fight to get better. He seems defeated. And I'll read some of his quotes from exit day, which was only a 2.5 minute interview. Some guys went 10, 12 minutes. So just to give you a sense of the mood in the room, he said, obviously not what I was expecting or what anyone was expecting for me coming in the season. There's still stuff to learn, just have to get back at it this summer, get better, and have a better year next year. I asked, is Utah still a place you want to be? And he said, I still have 1 year on my contract. I would like to be here, like the guys a lot here, love the fans. It's been a good city to play in, would be good to get back on track here. From my view, I don't know if he wants to be back in Utah, honestly, and I don't know if Utah wants him back either. I think they were forced into a corner to not utilize Maccelli as much as he would want to, just based on results and how well other guys were playing. But it's not good for his development. I mean, he's a guy that's proven that he can be a 20-plus goal scorer in the NHL, and having him shelved for a quarter of the season is not ideal, but he also wasn't giving you what you thought he could be, so that's on Maccelli as well. You're not going to play him if he's not performing well. But I think for him, when you look at the Utah lineup, does he really have a place there moving forward? Maybe, yes. Maybe he has a really good summer and comes into training camp and beats some guys out. But as it stands, especially if they bring 1 to 2 forwards in this summer, what is Maccelli's role? Especially not having the best track record this season. So I think for him, he wants to go somewhere where he's valued, where he's playing, where he's getting invested in to get better. And not to say that's not happening in Utah. We're not inside the locker room, but from him simply not playing, it looks like he might feel that way. And for Utah management as well, I think it's a hard decision for them, because this is a guy that they got later on in the draft, and he looked like a really big steal, and he proved that he could be the last 2 seasons, just not this year. So there's always the fear that if you move on from a player, they're going to go to their new team and they're going to have a 30-goal season. But I talked about it earlier in the podcast. I think those are the tough decisions you have to make at this stage of a rebuild, trying to be a playoff contender. Bill Armstrong decided to move on from Connor Geekie and JJ Moser last offseason to get Mikhail Sergachev. And he said, you're never comfortable moving on from guys that are homegrown, that you think could be big parts of the future, but that's what contending teams do. They take risks to get big rewards. So I think you might see that with Maccelli. And Elliot Friedman, the NHL insider for Sportsnet on the 32 Thoughts podcast this week, said for Utah to keep an eye on Maccelli. He said he thinks that they're going to find Maccelli a new home. No other specifics other than that. But yeah, I think it's just a really unfortunate and disappointing story for Maccelli and the organization. I don't think anyone thought the season was going to go this way. And I think it'll be really good for him to go home to Finland. That was the only time he cracked a smile during his exit interview was when we asked what he was doing this summer, what were his favorite parts about summer in Finland, and he seemed relieved to be talking about that and not about his season. He said it's a lot when you're not playing. You want to be out there with the guys, help the team win, but you're not. It's a mental grind, and I'm just trying to go through it. So maybe he'll go back, he'll reset, and he'll come back and be the player that they need him to be, or maybe Maccelli has played his last game for Utah Hockey Club. We shall see. I think that will do it just based on time for the players we're highlighting this podcast for the exit interviews, but we talked to everyone, so I'll have a lot more content of what came out of those conversations, as well as when we talked to Bill, Chris, and Andre early next week. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for tuning into the podcast this year and reading the Utah Hockey Club and the Salt Lake Tribune. I have so much fun with the coverage. It's been such a privilege being here for the inaugural season, and I'm not saying this just to say it, but one of my favorite parts of the job this year has been being able to connect with the fans, with the community. It really is as fun as it is because we get to talk to you guys, get your feedback, and what we do is really for you. You know, everything I'm writing and producing is with what you guys want to read and listen to in mind. So just want to say thank you so much for following along this season. It's just been the best time ever, and sometimes I still have to pinch myself that we all get to be on this ride together, but thank you so much. And like the players, I can't wait for next season and to keep giving you guys coverage throughout the season, so do not fret. We'll have stories and podcasts until opening night of the second year. But this is it for this week, and thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Club.